Well, and we can cut to the chase on that. That's exactly what we're talking about. Um, just that when you're talking about matters between the sexes and you use training, it gets the blue pill world a little on edge.
Yeah. So it basically comes down to, I think I always had a problem. See, my thing is, I can't, I could never respect anybody, man or woman, that acts like some sort of obstreperous child, that I have to kind of keep a collar on, keep in line. I tell them to sort of don't touch this. I'm speaking figuratively. That's mine, something personal, something meaningful to me, and they can't help but instigate and poke and create drama. And I don't want to manage that. And it's the same with me with jobs as well, where I can't stay in a job where I have to manage my manager. They're an arsehole. Whereas some people like that drama. There's people in jobs that love the challenge, so to speak. I don't. I like organisation, efficiency, human beings respecting each other, things like that. So whenever I heard somebody say, you got to keep your woman in line, and I just found it an exhausting thing, particularly since I never wanted children myself. I never liked the idea of going out with a child and constantly managing her, keeping her in line, keeping an eye on her, making sure she doesn't knock over the furniture and things like that.
Well, and that is, I think if we're going to be perfectly honest, this mentality of you need to keep a woman in line, you need to put her in her place, that sort of verbiage that we hear sometimes, that's usually, I associate that with a lack of maturity.
Yeah.
That there's almost, if you can bear with me while I indulge in a feminist stereotype of men, it strikes me as the false sort of macho bravado that feminists accuse all men of acting out in their lives. And it does sound that way. When I say I'm talking about training a woman, I'm talking about the same kind of training. For instance, I think you noticed, and we all have, between men, that frequently male friendships, or at least sometimes, will start with conflict. It's two guys sort of bumping heads, letting each other know where they're at. And when you figure that out, you know what lines, if you want trouble, you know what lines to cross. And if you want peace, you know where to keep how to keep things copacetic. That's training. That is two men training each other where their boundaries are.
Yeah.
And I respect that. That's it. And then there's no big maintenance routine after that. Once you have two people who understand where their boundaries are, and yes, women should have boundaries too.
Yeah.
When you have two people that assert where their boundaries are and they're steadfast about that, they are training everybody who comes into their realm how they'll be treated and how they won't.
It's really,
it's a fair word for it.
Yeah, when you think about it initially, with anyone close to you that matters intimately in your life, it's a human thing where it could be something as simple as, I don't like cantaloupe. And the other person keeps trying to force feed you cantaloupe and making you want to change. And why the fuck won't Joe eat cantaloupe? It's like, hey, what? Can you fucking stop it? Like,
Yeah.
do you want this to escalate? I've told you, what has it got to do with you? Oh, but I want you to change to like cantaloupe. And in a female sense, the poking and prodding and the stereotype of women always wanting men to change, it's basically to become an exact mirror of them so they can have some sort of sense of security. This person, I can trust them completely because they like everything I like. They like cantaloupes, they like traveling, they like restaurants, they like this, they like constant surprises, they like, it has to be an exact mirror of them. They can't let the other person exist, which I find kind of a little bit abhorrent, that you're kind of so solipsistic and so goddess-like that everything, if it doesn't mirror you, is beneath you, or you have a disdain for it. You can't let it exist on its own and respect it for what it is. So you're right.
I find that apparent in, for instance, like groups of very devout religious people who must get everybody around them to affirm their beliefs, or because they're basically insecure in their beliefs. If they were very secure, there wouldn't be a need to convert everybody and their brother into their way of thinking. Where it applies to women, where I think really gets to the heart of this discussion in many ways, is that women generally don't come to us as mature, well-boundaried, and respectful of boundaries in ways that men have between each other. We do have to train women. Women will come and they will shit test us, for instance, which is a boundary violation. Women are hypergamous. They go for control in relationships frequently. This is the way we socialize them. I'm not saying they're spit out this way, but we do socialize women to have the last word in relationships, and many of them come into relationships expecting that, which of course is insane and infantile. Nobody can come in reasonably to a relationship and expect that their word is the last word on all matters. But my experience with women is that's how many of them come to me. And so my spiel on this is where masculine leadership really counts as being able to sit women down and explain to them what boundaries are, what your boundaries are, what's going to fly, what's not going to fly, and consequently, how you're going to treat them with respect for their boundaries. And if they can't reciprocate that and can't be trained into reciprocating it, then you need to know that early on.
Yeah, maybe that's always been my problem. I never wanted to lead anybody, which has probably been half of my problems in my own past relationships. I sort of, and I know a lot of guys will say, oh, that's a foolish way to think about it. I really didn't have much of a sort of figurative distinction between another person, whether it's my partner, like the close, if it's a friend, a close friend, a close female partner, close family member, that sort of respectful understanding of the other person in and of themselves and as an individual was really at the heart of me and my relationships. So when it came to male-female, quote unquote romantic relationships, I found it hard to put on the romantic mask. I could only just be who I was with my friends and my family and who I was out in the world, but I couldn't now adopt this new script where like now I have to be the trainer. Boundaries, sure. But I think one thing you mentioned before that something popped up in my mind when you talked about religious people is, at least with religious people, you know where they stand. There's a book that's dogmatic and you know that's the concrete sort of Archimedean point that they believe in. That's it. It's not changing. And that's where they differ. If you're part of that sect or religious group, if you're an independent mind and you start thinking outside of it and start questioning, what if God, blah, 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 they'll pull you right back in and they'll say, no, you don't, that's the word of God or whatever. Like there's only so far you can philosophize in regards to religion. But I think the frustrating thing with women is that their Bible, it changes daily. So in the initial period of,
how do you get it to last a whole day?
How do you get it to last typically past the honeymoon period with guys, which is what tends to be the frustrating thing for men, is that the honeymoon period is great. You're agreeable. You don't fight. You settle into each other. And when it settles into sort of the normality of we know each other, we know what the life is going to be like, that's when the change occurs. I've speculated that it might have something to do with an innate cyclic nature. They go through periods. There's this constant rebirth that's sort of ingrained in women. So there's a constant change, a reflex for change, whereas because they might depend on men for stability and security, we've got this reflex for constancy and we don't want it to change, yet they also want security, which sort of they're pulling against two things. So like men is like, I wouldn't care if a woman had the dogmatic religious mind that she has when I meet her. And if I like that, I would, most men would love that, because, hey, I can count on this religious nut not changing who they are. I can count on it. But women are anything but something like someone who's religious or dogmatic. They're just fluid. And that's half the problem when you're looking
that's
to
my
build a
point.
family.
And what I was talking about earlier wasn't at all to imply that I think you're foolish. I don't think that at all. It's just that women, as a rule, do not come into relationships with expectations that are going to pair well with a guy who's invested in red pill philosophy, for lack of a better term. There is a mismatch there that's going to happen nearly every time with women. So I agree with you. I don't want to, the role of trainer isn't, and masculine leadership for me isn't something that is an exerted force that I have to work on. All I have to do is know my values, know where my boundaries are, know what I'm okay with and what I'm not okay with, and be prepared to draw that line in a very, very finite way. Whenever the situation comes up, that's training. It's not like I'm having to lead and go into life 101 with women and say, this is how you open a door, here's how you order your eggs in a restaurant or anything like that. But, oh, you think because I'm a guy that I've got to open all your doors? Guess what, sweetheart? Your arms aren't broken. Reach for the door and open it for yourself, because I'm not going to do that.
And it's a shame in some ways. I'm not sort of speaking like I'm a traditionalist, but men generally like helping out and doing things. And, the civilization we've built is sort of, we've built and progressed not just for ourselves, but whether it's pride, to feel the tribe pat us on the back and make us feel worthwhile, we enjoy helping others or doing things outside of ourselves that will not just benefit ourselves directly. So it's like, I like helping out and helping people, especially people that are weaker than me who need help and things like that. And you couple that with our biological sort of unseen connection with women, where there's this gravitational unseen pull towards them. We want to help them the most. Guys will die for them. And the fact that today the prefrontal, which really doesn't control us that much, is actually dominating our lizard brain to that degree that it's so either dangerous with women or insulting, that we're supposed to love people who laugh at us or hate us or dislike us. It's the fact that men can sort of abate that really natural pull. And I'm amazed at how many guys in their teens and 20s can rationally be cautious of women today. I remember when I was that age, I was a heroin addict when it came to women. You could,
me too.
You couldn't. I would jump off a cliff for women, and I dare say, look, I'm exaggerating, but toward that degree.
Well, maybe a little bit, but.
Well, look, think historically, women and children first, the Titanic, and all those examples, going to war, and this sense of honor and pride, almost like Hamlet on stage, almost like an internal stoic monologue that would have some sort of meaning towards you, that you were doing the right thing and you really believed in it, like a religion. Women were like a religion that you'd have your hand and your heart on, and they would cooperatively reinforce that religion that you would die for. Now It's kind of, that religion doesn't exist. The religion of women, between women and men, it's kind of like they've exposed it. It's like, no, you're a joke, but die for me. It's like, are you serious? Like, now that you've actually insulted me openly, socially, and I see.
And there are still guys that will do it, that will, I saw a card one time not too long ago in a store, a little joke card, and it said, why are men like floors? And it said, if you lay them right the first time, you can walk on them forever. Um, that is a lot of what I see in men. And it's certainly what I saw in myself as a younger man. I think that I was instinctively aware that women were drawn to strength, and my ability to problem solve, to fix things, to make things right was a way I expressed a strength that I thought that they were attracted to. And I was largely right. That was also a way to attract their control.
Yeah, this is a thing I also wanted to ask you. A topic I kind of noticed that's related to this, in terms of, you mentioned strength, is psychologically, and that's why I wanted to speak to you about it, because I think people sort of maybe appreciate our perspective on it because we're interested in male psychology, is why do men naturally have a much more natural will towards strength when it's in relation to women? Psychologically speaking, they'll get themselves up and puff themselves out, notwithstanding biology, right? But just the emotional, psychological will. They're much more ready to do that for a woman when a woman's puppeteering them, but not for themselves. So when you take a woman out of the equation, I'm sure you've noticed in the manosphere that when the woman's not in the picture, they can sort of, say this: we don't need women, MGTOW forever, monk, I'm going to basically shut out the world. But there's no will. There's a nihilism. But with women, there's not a nihilism. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think it is biology. I know you said biology notwithstanding, but male strength and reproductive access went hand in hand for hundreds of thousands of years. I mean, on some level, that had to precondition us to the display of strength in order to appeal to women, much like a male peacock will display its plumage. That's what we do.
Yeah.
And I think that women respond to it for good reason. If the male is strong, if he's a better problem solver, then you probably got a better shot at your offspring surviving.
Yeah, I know that. I'm like I said, it's not that I'm discounting that. I'm not saying that the biology aspect doesn't exist. It's the overriding dominant factor. It's the thing, right? But if we were to ignore that, just look at, I suppose, my disappointment in men not having to. I mean, men don't need to be euphoric about life 3 times more than they were when they were a horny teenager. But I mean, I find it interesting, especially as I get older and I look at men that fist pump about whatever in the manosphere, like sort of being separate from women. We don't need women. And I'm not saying men should or need to. But the lack of will, and most importantly, emotionally willful in their own lives, like wanting to do things, like being in love with even hobbies. The love for anything starts to disappear, and there's no will to even love your hobbies. The car project in the garage starts gathering cobwebs, whereas with the wife, you'd fight for your time, half an hour out of each day to work on this little thing you loved because it was for you. Now that you've got all the time for you, I wanted your thoughts on what you thought about that. I think
it depends on the man a lot. If you look at the lives of people like Edison and Einstein, Tesla, and others, these guys accomplished huge things, and they largely shunned women. I think they engaged them out of sexual desire, and then really didn't want much to do with them after that. They were too busy. And I think when you see men who are on a self-actualized path, then they don't need women as a motivator to engage in a lot of things. Guys, you can swear off women. You can say, okay, I'm digging what the manosphere is saying. I don't need a bitch in my life. And sure enough, a lot of those guys will end up trying to fill their time with anything, and not knowing how. I've seen it happen. I agree with you. I agree with that. I think you've got it nailed on what happens with a lot of men. I just happen to think those are men that need a reason to get off their ass other than being driven.
Yeah,
And
it's almost like a lack of interest in, for me, I see a lack of interest in life itself, predominantly life from your own perspective. Because a lot of them, you see them, they sort of like mope around, they don't want to do anything, there's no motivation, not just health, going to the gym. A lot of that sort of strength and how you look for a female, that underlies a lot of men working out. But it's zero energy for anything, even for yourself. And then I notice men, when they find a woman or get married, all of a sudden they're recharged. All of a sudden they care. Whether it's through their child, they start caring about somebody else that's weaker. They start loving again. They start loving their child. They start loving the weak. They start loving their community. But as a singular man, it's almost like the female is a gatekeeper for a man expressing any kind of will or love for life itself.
for the average guy, that's absolutely true. And it's something that I hope, I mean, my challenge in life is to transcend that personally. And I think it should be the objective of every man to transcend that. There is benefit for some men. Without a woman, they're just not motivated to do anything. They would sit around in a shithole apartment until the day they die, not doing much other than, I don't know, smoking weed and watching movies. You'll see this a lot in guys that live a life of isolation. But the point here, that the thing that you're describing is gynocentrism, is the idea that if I'm connected to a woman, well, now I've got a reason for being. Now I've got a reason to do this. Now I've got a reason to do that and to feel good about it. And yes, they are more charged and energetic. And part of that, I think, is because we're natural pair bonders too.
Yeah.
That is what we do. But hopefully the thing I like about being a human being instead of a, I don't know, water buffalo, is that I can rise above what I'm told to do. And in fact, I can say without reservation, I would be doing exactly what I'm doing as passionately as I'm doing it, whether I was with somebody or not. As a matter of fact, if you can imagine, it wasn't really particularly easy a few times being me in a relationship, doing what I do. But that's something I moved on in spite of. It wasn't because of the relationship that motivated me. It was because I overcame the obstacles in the relationship to do it.
What do you mean exactly? Like in your past, like you acted in, say, more obsequious ways, or?
Oh, certainly in my past I did. Absolutely. In my youth, my God, I was an embarrassment, honestly, where it concerned women. I look back at some of my behaviors and I have no idea exactly what I was thinking or why I was doing what I was doing, except for the most simple explanation is that I would do anything to get the approval of a woman with literally no limits.
I think this is the funny thing with guys like, say, what I'm reading between you and I, that we were so far on the other side that we got to a point that we were so embarrassed of ourselves that we couldn't look in the mirror anymore. We couldn't mouth those platitudes to make her happy anymore. We couldn't see our lives being walked all over, that there was a breaking point. And it's almost like you look back and there's a demarcation of who you were and who you were after that point. Like it's part of that kind of red pill thing, that Archimedean point of change is like, I was this person before and now I'm someone else. I can't be that other person anymore. That is history, even if I wanted to. I can't pretend not to see what I see and know. And the barrier, the filter of speaking my mind now is sort of, it's not what it was before. Before I'd keep my mouth shut to keep her happy or, make sure everyone else's feelings were taken care of, but mine didn't matter. And that was my reward for being a good guy that would care about everyone and everything else in the world except for yourself.
And I can't even claim to have even those kind of altruistic leanings or tendencies. I know one of the turning points for me of many was a relationship I had in my early 20s that went on. I think it took her probably 2.5 months to lose respect for me. After 3 months, she dropped me like a hot potato because I was an obsequious fuck who couldn't command the respect of other men, much less women. And my God, I was miserable. I was only with her for 3 months. And for 6 months after that, I was in absolute misery, absolute black cloud of grief and loss. And of course, that was probably directly proportional to how attractive she was. And she was incredibly attractive. There was something, I didn't go red pill in that moment, but there was something about that event that I did say, finally, never again. I'm not going to ever do this.
As in sort of you did everything objectively right and still you were wrong?
No, that I invested to the point that, like I said, I was miserable twice as long as I was in that relationship. There's something unnatural about that. I should have grieved for a month or so and been on about my business. But I was so dependent on her approval that I sold myself out entirely. And then at the end of it, I was crushed. There was nothing left of me. I was an abysmal mess for months and months. And at the end of that, I said, I'm not going back here again. No matter what I do, I'm never going to give so much to a relationship that I will suffer like this.
Yeah, that's interesting. I had a similar introspection many years ago where I had that bit of a crack where it was half embarrassment, but half kind of a lucid light bulb moment where I noticed that months, 6 months, like I was still haunted by what happened, the breakup. And objectively, I did very little, if anything, wrong. But everything was my fault. And as a man, you want to make 1 + 1 = 2, and it doesn't. And what I noticed is something you just touched on, is that if something in with my friends or family happened, say somebody passed away, you would grieve, but it wouldn't haunt you as long as an inconsequential female stranger.
And isn't that pathetic? But it's true.
It is. And that haunting that just stayed with me and it wouldn't leave, I found troubling and I wanted to get to the bottom of it. It sounds like you had a similar thing where this is unnatural. Like, why can I make sense of family and friends, even in the hardest times, in terms of loss and bereavement and stress and conflict and all those things? But with a woman, it just never ends. It could last years for some men. And especially say you've got children, as a reminder of that haunting, that'll last a lifetime. And it's a really strange, like you said, almost unnatural thing to have weighing down.
Well, there's a reason that during any other part of life, there's a 4-to-1 ratio suicide of men over women, 4 times to 1. We know from research that during divorce and breakup of long-term relationships, that those numbers go to 11 to 1.
I thought it was high. I thought it was 17. No, 11.
It maybe depends on where you are or what study, but okay. It goes many-fold more times over again when men break up and end long-term relationships. I even remember Angry Harry back in the day. He had a parting of the way with his with his wife, and he and I talked about that a lot. And 6 months after the breakup, his main complaint was he had no idea what to do with himself.
Yeah, it's that kind of that's what I was mentioning before. It's the psychological aspect. If this is one of the gems, if guys can be interested enough in their own psychology in terms of the red pill, the stuff you and I just spoke about, like, just recognizing philosophically, this doesn't seem natural, that I'm haunted and feel so awful about this person and still attached to this person in the past and this sort of narrative and story of the past. Whereas with any other meaningful relationship, it would make sense there'd be an acceptance. There's a clarity towards it. But this is a vaguey, foggy, odd, haunting kind of thing that does not make sense for a male brain that desperately wants to make sense of something that's really affecting him. It's almost like men are dead until women bring them to life. And when a woman
that's an
leaves,
interesting way to put it.
And when women leave men are figuratively walking ghosts. It's a strange thing, but I think it goes a long way into what you and I were describing. For the kind of mind that's interested in life and themselves and finally respects themselves, we want to make sense of it, even if it means, really pushing hard back on our biology for the greater good of what does make sense.
And that is essentially what you have to do. I find it all fascinating. I think you're right that men tend to become the walking dead after a relationship ends. And the thing is, it is as simple as defining and living by your values. If you're willing to say to yourself, okay, if I lose this woman who is violating, she wants me to pay for everything, she has expensive tastes, I know she's using me, and my values say that I don't get used this way by anybody. So the moment a man is willing to say to himself that I'm willing to endure the pain of losing her in order to live by my values, he's won. He's turned the corner.
Yeah.
On this malady, this male malady we have, that I know the biological determinists are going to be out there saying, well, Paul, it's reproductive stuff. And, if a man isn't reproducing, then he has no biological purpose. So therefore he ends up feeling that way. There may be some truth to that. I don't know. I don't buy all this determinism because I know that I came to that point in my life. And finally, at one point, after a bad divorce, and after actually too many bad relationships to count over a number of years, I came to a crossroads with myself that said, you're either going to live by your values or you're not. And not doing it has obviously made you a wreck.
That's right.
And once I got willing to lose a woman, it's been all a coast downhill from there. And I mean downhill in a good way, the easy trip.
Yeah. And look, I feel sympathy for guys that this resonates, it sounds right, and say they do take the plunge, and then afterwards they feel like, oh, fuck, I listened to Paul or huMAN or whoever, and like I have no idea what to do anymore. I sympathize with that. But again, would you rather be where you were, living like a doormat, never being right, never speaking, just being a yes machine to somebody else that you sort of know you're more capable? You should be the leader, but you're not. And, I know these traditionalists will say, well, you just got to be the leader. But for me, it's like, for what? What? For me, the question is, what am I leading? Like, if I have respect as a leader, that's fine. But if what I say doesn't go and I'm always getting pushback, that's what I was talking about in terms of the training. If you train a dog, the training occurs at the start, and that's in a relationship. You train each other, you get to know each other. You don't hear of, a guy who would die for his dog as they've passed that initial couple of years where the youthful stage of the dog. Now they're mirrors of each other. They're on the same page. You never hear of this like, oh man, my dog changed 5 years, like 5 years after I bought it. And like I had to give it away or something. We didn't get along. He just, unless it's some sort of biological brain damage with the dog, you're not going to have that. But this is the thing that men find frustrating. It's not to call women dogs, but just recognize how much men love dogs and why that relationship is so strong. There's a training between the man and the dog initially, but then they're like each other's shadows. They know each other's shorthand. Like it's beautiful. It's unspoken. And the fact that women keep sort of recycling the relationships and themselves back to zero, like a newborn pup again. I don't know if it's excitement or a new present or something, that Christmas mentality. It's like a man wants something steadfast and a companion. Like that's what a relationship is to a man once that initial period ends. And I just really don't understand the resistance with, look, I know I understand the resistance, but I can't fathom logically why they resist men trying to relay how much we love dogs, and they just don't get why we love dogs so much. And they can't take a kernel of truth from why we love dogs and kind of go, okay, men make sense. We understand why that works, but they don't. They refuse to.
Well, I think part of the equation here too is a matter of poor introspection and a lack of honesty. One of the things I picked up on just in the past 5 minutes in this discussion is that both of us apparently came to parts of our lives where we were willing to look in the mirror and see the yes man that was staring back at us.
Mm.
You know, I've seen guys running around kissing their women's asses, looking over their shoulder before they talk, better make mama happy, because if mama ain't happy, ain't nobody happy. And guys live in that way. And when you challenge them on it, they act like they don't know what the fuck you're talking about. What do you mean I'm on my knees? I'm doing what I want to do. I'm just reciprocating in a relationship or some other bullshit, when you know that's not what's happening. When you know that they've become the yes men that you and I talked about having become in relationships. So at some point, a guy has to be willing to look in the mirror and see what he's become. To me, it's not even about her, man. My idea of training is you do a little bit here and there. You don't invest a ton of energy into it, because all you're really doing is living by your values. Guys like that won't live by their values. Hell, they don't even know what their values are half the time. And they certainly don't have their values when they enter a relationship with a woman. It becomes all about her, making her happy, throwing their friends away, turning their backs on hobbies and interests, investing only in making this woman happy. And they don't see anything obsequious or servile about any of that. It's just what you do to take care of a woman. And they become quite hostile if you try to get them acknowledge what they're doing. So those guys are locked into that. I think they go to their grave that way. I just got scared at one point. I don't want to die and have my epitaph say, "Here lies a pussy." I just don't want that. And I know that's base, but there is a sentiment in there that's true. I want my life to be mine. I like that I have a woman connected to me in life, but she's not my life.
Mm.
She's not supposed to be.
I almost, what helped me when I was younger, sort of grow balls, figuratively, if you want, because I'm a naturally sensitive person. I kind of step outside of myself as a third person and look at situations and see if I'm being unfair. And at one point, over and over again, in my 20s, say, and early 30s, perhaps, it was only when I kind of I took a look at things from another perspective, not just as a third impartial party, because sometimes you can be a bit too analytical and philosophical. You can excuse things philosophically where you shouldn't. And at one point, I kind of go, if I was looking at this situation I was in with a female, if I was my own son, what reaction would I be having towards myself? How would I defend myself? And I just went fucking ballistic. I stood up I started standing up for myself with like a stern, complete clarity that I never had before. When, like, it was only when I put myself in the position of a father or my parents, how they saw me, like the sympathy they might feel about me being in anguish in a breakup, or how I'd see my son, someone I'd care about. Then I'd fucking put my chest out and said, fuck you to anything, and started standing up for my values. But sometimes I notice even guys, and I fall into the trap sometimes because I find psychology and philosophy interesting. You can start balancing things too intellectually, and you can see too many sides, and there's little clarity. But I remember that helped me in the past.
I've never heard. I mean, I may be stealing that and sharing that story with people. I think it's a great idea.
If
How
it
would you act? I mean, it's funny when you look at how people live and you ask them. One of the exercises, group exercises we used to do in the treatment business was to ask a group of people to build a baby, to come up with the characteristics and behavioral traits and personality traits that they would like to instill in a child.
Mm.
And then when you compare it to your own life, it'd be a little embarrassing. But I think that's a great idea to ask yourself, if my son was watching me, how would I behave?
Or if I was my son, again, you could sort of reflect it with the Jordan Peterson thing, like treat yourself like someone you're responsible for. And that's probably the most heartfelt, strongest sort of thing, a man who perhaps wants to have children. And I've never wanted children myself, but when I look from that perspective, I really started to defend myself. It's from like defending that which you care about that is weaker than you or innocent, defending innocence and standing up for that which is either blind or can't or is inexperienced. And that's the thing with a lot of guys rationally when they speak about this stuff, they know it, they stand up for it, but then on autopilot, they don't. So you're free to sort of use it. I just remember.
And that too goes back to what I've tried to assert all these years in doing this work with men around this stuff, is that our biggest enemy is the gulf between our values and ideals and who we really are, how we really live. If we would just identify our values in life and actually live by them, even when there's a cost, most of our problems with women and with other people go away.
And this is the hard thing. It only gets better and easier. And I can say for myself, I'm never 100% on it because we go on autopilot, and our nature and our biology and the way we've come out of the oven from childhood and all of that sort of stuff, that tends to sort of run us. And it's very hard to consciously, moment to moment, always be sort of, and you don't want to be too rigid as well. You want it to be a natural sort of way that you react and operate. It only comes from when, as you sort of are open to red pill ideas and you start naming your values, standing up for them, and more importantly, speaking them through language, that when you're in situations at work with women, etc., is when you get that little feeling like, oh, I feel embarrassed, oh, I feel like shit, oh, I shouldn't have said that, or maybe I shouldn't say that, but you're censoring yourself, but objectively there's nothing wrong with what you're saying. As much as possible, I encourage men to become articulate in this stuff, be interested enough to form the words and not just kind of become a cliche generator in the male space and say, oh, Briffault's law, hypergamy, divorce rate,
family court.
It's like, yeah, great, bumper sticker. But unless in real time, consciously, when you're in like what you and I have been doing here, in real time, just running with the ideas, forming sentences about what we believe in our values, what we know to be true. We're not pulling out cliches and just stringing them together in sentences. Because I think at heart, a man, when he tries to do that in public, he comes off as a loon. Like, oh, there's that nutcase sort of men's rights or MGTOW kind of guy just saying, well, you women, it's like a disjointed conversation. Like, why is this guy berating us about divorce? We weren't even talking about that. And that's all some guy, they can only talk about male issues just disjointed in that way, just a barrage of women are unfair and here are the words and sentences I'll throw at you, rather than you as a human being talking like you and I are now, standing up articulately, respectfully, but not backing down from who we are. I'm not gonna minimize who I am, my masculinity, what I value, or anything just because you start to have a look on your face as though I made you eat a lemon. Like, I don't care.
And I think living that way means that when it comes to your risk factors like family court and false accusations and many other things that we do complain about having to deal with as men, your chances of those things drop precipitously when you embrace your responsibility to walk what you talk. When you do that, things get better. They do.
Playing devil's advocate, I can just hear many men saying, well, yeah, you're wrong because a woman will take me for everything I have.
Oh, yes. I've heard it all before. It's whiny bullshit to me.
But I think and I agree with the sentiment, what you're saying is if you live by your values, you won't even get into bed with a woman like that. You won't even go on a second date with a woman like that.
And you won't let yourself be in a position where it can happen to you. I mean, you never know when the meteor is going to come out of the sky. Some woman you worked with 20 years ago may point a crooked finger at you. I mean, there is always some kind of bullshit risk like that does happen to people. But the fact of the matter is that if you're living by your values, you're not going to put yourself, well, like one of my values is I don't put myself in jeopardy with the law. That means I don't get married.
Yeah.
That means I have separate bank accounts. It means everything is separate and non-touchable.
Yeah, yeah.
And I live that way. And guess what? So when a guy says, well, no, you can't do it because some woman's going to take everything you own. Well, yeah, if you're an idiot. But if you put everything you own underneath her nose and dare her to take it, yeah.
And look, there's always a small chance. But if you're rationally self-respecting and you do everything you can to sort of be around the right people, not excuse bad behavior, and you never back down from your values, the chances of that risk eventuating negatively for you is a lot more minimal than the guy who will just be a yes person to bad bosses, bad women, bad everything, and feel like they're a powerless person and they're nihilistic. So there's a risk in everything. It's like saying, well, you could get cancer. It's like, sure. Well, what do you do? Do you not dance in life? Do you not do anything you want to do and sort of hold the steering wheel and do it in the best, safest way you can, rationally? Like you said, don't get married because that risk is like a 50 to 60% of marriages end. And
that's a dumb risk.
85% of women initiate those divorce. That's different compared to other risks that'll be, there's 5 to 10% of this negative thing happening to you. And if you're very strong with your values, you can minimize it to 5 realistically. Sure, the anomaly can hit you, but if you've got the right sort of self-respect, you never back down and you're willing to take the loss, as you said, and you're well aware, you've got your eyes open for, okay, even if this happens, it's an axe over my head that I can see. I'm not blind to it. I'm not pretending it's not there. And I've said it with guys who sort of tell me that they avoid risk much more than I do. I still date from time to time, but I have my boundaries with women that, again, like the marriage, joint bank accounts, living together, children, all that kind of stuff. Like I just want companionship from time to time when I do feel like dating a woman or spending time with a female. It mitigates as you get older, but I've always protected what my life is and what I value. And the moment I start seeing it being absorbed or someone forcefully taking it, it's like, I feel awful because I'm disappearing. And I've never understood why other guys let women or bad bosses or anyone do that to them. It's a sort of a disappearing of yourself.
Well, and look at it from another angle too. What you just said, that living by your values and your boundaries. When I made it apparent early on in my current, like almost 18-year relationship, that any woman that was going to be with me would have to find her purse. I wasn't a sugar daddy, and I wasn't going to be a sugar daddy under any circumstances for anyone. It would just never happen. And I had told women before I met her, If you can't find your purse on a date, then, fine. I'll see you later. My partner has never done one thing in 18 years that's been vindictive. We've had some fights, of course, some doozies. Never been vindictive for a moment. When you set limits with women, when you assert your values, and when you weed out, because what I did by insisting that women carry their own financial weight, I weeded out the opportunistic whores automatically. They were gone early. So I don't have to worry about what she's going to do 10 years down the road.
Mm.
She was a woman that came into this carrying her own weight. Now, that could change. I don't have a crystal ball, but I think it's a lot of preventative medicine goes into this stuff simply by asserting who you are and not yielding to gynocentric impulses from whatever woman you're with.
And look, like I'm fairly sure, I don't want to speak for you, but I'm fairly sure, like you would admit as well, if a guy would ask you, like, there's a chance that your woman could take you to the cleaners and change tomorrow, and you'd be logical enough to sort of say, yeah, there's a possibility. I'm not saying, but it's very small given all the measures I take, the longevity, the proof in the amount of years and how we both stood by each other, how we both trained each other from a very early sort of stage, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. It's like if you might as well point to an octogenarian, someone in their 80s who's been married for 50 years, and you go, you never know, she might turn around tomorrow. And it's like, yeah, maybe, yes, okay, if we want to talk mathematically, there is a small chance, but realistically, guys, like, not that
there's a mathematical chance I'm going to get killed tomorrow going to the grocery store. I'm still going.
Yeah. Look at all the hobbies, like guys who sort of skydive and bungee jump and base jump and stuff like that. There's not that many guys screaming at them and saying, like, you're an idiot. It's like saying, oh, that looks like a lot of fun, even though the risk factor is like astronomical. But again, it's,
yes, I just tell them you got bigger balls than I do.
Yeah, it's almost like this is the thing. I understand guys really get fearful, or they've been really hurt, especially after marriage, and like it's a pain I can't imagine. I can only sympathize with it, but I can understand the wanting to minimize that from ever happening again, because you just don't know whether you can take it as a human being anymore.
I've been there. I've been that guy. And what I figured out, it was sort of like, oh, duh. If you don't get married, you don't end up divorced.
Oh, yeah. What's that joke? Like, what's the single biggest contributing factor to divorce? It's marriage. Yeah,
absolutely. And it's not a joke. It's the truth. And it's awful. I wish things weren't that way. At this point in my life, it'd be cool if things were that way, but it's not something I'm really obsessed with or worrying about. And I don't obsess on risk in life. To me, that's a fool's errand.
Yeah.
There's risk everywhere in everything you do. And if you want to be perfectly safe, well, have fun with that. You'll never get there. For me, we may be having two conversations. For me, this conversation was really about just sort of affirming a lot of my thoughts about the importance of knowing who you are and making an just unapologetic decision of here's who I am, that's me. There's not open for compromise, nor my values. I think that is, I hate to put such a big, powerful blanket term on it, but to me, that's a secret to life. If there is one, is getting right in your own skin and taking away the power of anybody, other men, authority figures, and women, taking away their power of altering that or forcing you to be something you're not. If you can do that, you're not going to be sweating small risks very much.
Yeah, I've always I've found it always peculiar and odd, and again, it might just be down to different personalities, but often the nihilistic kind of guy when I talk to them when they've given up or they're kind of very fearful about whatever, is the lack of interest they have and lack of will and interest they have of themselves, like an interest in life, their own life. And it's, as I mentioned before, they only come to life if it's through the context of a female, like, oh, now I can be a father, a job, a career that's fulfilling. But if you take all that away, the sort of the deadness in a male to be interested enough about life itself in terms of him. And I can see it's scary. I've always been defensive about it. I've always pushed back on relationships where they were taking that part away from me. I was very, very aware of it. And I find it odd when I meet a very majority of men who really don't have that wire in them. And maybe it's just a personal thing. I don't know. But then again,
I don't know either. I know that I was that kind of guy. I was the kind of guy that without a woman, I really didn't feel like there was much in life for me to be interested in or to care about. And so what I do, I occupied myself with finding another woman. That I was either with a woman and short-term happy and then ultimately miserable, or I was looking for a woman, but I wasn't looking for me. And living that way taught me to do what I'm doing now, because there's a consequence for being selfless. You'll pay every time for that.
It's almost like when you're selfless, you're a battery that gets drained slowly over time and sometimes very fast.
You're a battery that's running around begging to get drained.
And you're
insisting.
You're never getting filled up. You're never getting recharged. And when something breaks and like a relationship ends or a life change, you sort of, that time you spend alone, time, the cliche that time heals, is like you slowly charge your batteries in solitude and in your own life. And then you feel like, okay, I'm sufficiently charged, I'm sufficiently red-pilled. And you go back out into the world and you think you're strong enough for another woman. And then all of a sudden she starts draining your battery again.
And that there's a phenomena in that I see all the time. It literally breaks my heart. I hate to see it so much. But what men do all the time in relationships is they look for water in an empty bucket.
Yeah.
And they keep going back. And I've heard them say thousands of times, I can't believe she acted that way. I can't believe she wasn't there for me. I can't believe this. I can't believe that. And it's already happened like 50 fucking times. And they're still sitting there saying, I can't believe this happened. Can you believe this happened? I say, yeah, I can believe it. It's happened over and over again. Can you believe it? Again, I think we're our own worst enemies. I really do in this respect.
Well, it's one of the things. I think it was Nietzsche that said, "Hope is the most destructive attribute in man because it keeps him suffering." So when you're with a woman that sort of she keeps doing little things that you ignore, little warning signs like no, like you're optimistic all the time, and you just keep sort of
yes, and that optimism is a killer because I see men all the time, and I've seen them. They get hit with divorce papers. They have no fucking idea it was about to come. They get flattened like they got hit by a city bus. And the first words out of their mouths was, I had no idea.
Mm.
They don't know. All their thinking is narrowly reduced to, am I making her happy or not? And am I doing the right thing? Because that hope that Nietzsche was talking about, I see Ben go into family courts with that hope all the time. Oh yeah, if I just tell my side of the story and I'm truthful and honest, I'll get justice. I never noticed anything. I didn't see anything coming. And guys, it's flashing at you like a brilliant neon sign and bellowing at 100 decibels right into your ear.
Yeah, all you have to do is when you hear that comment is, okay, describe her personality, her negative traits. And then you'll say, oh, well, she loses her temper a bit. She's like, okay, can you see why you should have seen that coming? Like describe her personality. If you describe somebody's like, they're just like perfection. They're a beautiful person, and then all of a sudden one day she's cheating on you with some fucking bouncer, and she leaves you, takes the kids. It's like, okay, you never saw it coming. I agree, that's an amazing story. But if you describe her personality, honestly describe her negative traits that you saw from day one, that you might have thought as quirky, or you thought of as, I found her a strong, independent person, which is fine. I like strength in a woman too, but not the negative kind where I can see it sort of, butting up against me and being challenging, which is one thing I noticed in my past personal stories. Whenever I heard a woman in the past kind of like, I think men and women should challenge each other in a healthy way in relationships. I kind of thought intellectual conversation, yeah, it's good, interesting. No, you don't want a woman who likes challenges, who likes surprises, who likes that kind of antagonistic drama kind of stuff, but they mask it in a language of healthy competition, that kind of stuff.
Oh, yeah, that's when guys who are thinking with their dicks come up with some pithy line like, I like them feisty.
Yeah.
No, you don't. That's just what you say because dealing with the behavior is unthinkable to you. So you come up with something like, I like them feisty, or she's really independent, or whatever nonsensical bullshit you can dream up to justify why you can't confront inappropriate behavior in a life partner.
And I think some guys excuse that feistiness or see it as a badge of honor because they correlate it to the bedroom. It's because you'd have to manhandle someone who's sort of resistant or feisty. So they correlate it to good sex, which there's an element of truth when I think about it in my past relationships. But if that's the only good thing, it's like I spend a fraction of my time having sex and 99% of my life with her is sort of an obstreperous personality where I say black and she says white and I say up and she says down. It's like, fuck that. No.
No, I'm with you on that. Well, what do you think? About time to wrap it up?
Thanks to Paul for taking the time to chat. Check out his channel, link below. Subscribe, like, comment, link, and share my videos around. There are donation options below if you'd like to support me also. I appreciate those who have and continue to. Thanks, guys.